All right, welcome back, everyone. Ready for another deep dive?
Ready when you are.
Awesome. So today we're tackling something I think a lot of people are thinking about these days, and that's bouncing back from financial hardship.
Yeah, it's a topic that resonates, for sure.
It really does. And, there's a ton of advice out there, but we're going deep on a video summarizing advice from entrepreneur Alex Hormozi.
Interesting. I've heard his name, but haven't really dug into his stuff. What's his approach like?
It's pretty different from the usual, positive vibes only kind of stuff you hear a lot.
Oh, so tell me more. What makes it unique?
He's very tactical, almost like here's a blueprint, here's a framework for building financial resilience, which I really appreciated. And one of the first things that really jumped out at me was his emphasis on skills.
Skills. That's interesting.
Yeah, he calls them your most valuable asset. And he doesn't just say they're important. He really emphasizes why in today's economy where things are changing so fast, those transferable skills are like the ultimate safety net.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on that?
I mean, it makes total sense. When you think about it, skills, unlike money or possessions, those can't be taken away from you, right? It's something that you truly own and control. I mean, he talks about this a lot in the context of entrepreneurship, but I think it applies across the board.
Absolutely. It makes you think differently about your career or your side hustle or even just like navigating everyday life.
For sure.
Now, another thing he talks about that I thought was interesting was this idea of surrounding yourself with successful people.
Oh, the old saying, right?
Yeah, it sounds like a cliche, but he really digs into why it's so impactful. And not just from a, fake it till you make it perspective.
Yeah, because, I mean, who you surround yourself with, it really does shape your reality in a lot of ways.
Totally.
It's like, their mindsets, their habits, their beliefs, all that kind of rubs off on you.
Exactly.
And, when you're exposed to people who've achieved things that you aspire to, it can really shift your own beliefs about what's possible.
Yeah, that's a good point. It's not about copying their lifestyles.
Right.
It's more about absorbing those strategies, learning from their experiences, recognizing opportunities that you might have otherwise missed.
Absolutely.
It makes you kind of rethink this idea that you need to already be successful to connect with successful people.
Right, like it's some exclusive club,
Yeah. Where do you think people can actually find these connections, without being millionaires or having these fancy titles?
Well, I think it's about thinking outside the box a little bit. It's not always about those, super exclusive clubs or high-profile events.
Right.
It can be much simpler than that. Think about joining industry groups or local meetups, engaging in those online communities related to your interests or your career goals.
That's a good point.
Even something like volunteering for organizations aligned with your values, that can expose you to a really diverse network of individuals.
That's true. You never know who you're going to meet. Now, here's where Hormozi's advice gets really, unexpected.
Okay, I'm intrigued.
He actually advocates for acquiring businesses over real estate.
Oh, wow. Okay, that is unexpected.
I know, because real estate is so often touted as like the path to wealth building.
Yeah, it's like the classic, right?
So what's his reasoning?
Well, he frames it as a cash flow argument. He's saying that businesses, especially those that are well established, have a proven track record, they can generate income pretty much immediately.
Okay.
While real estate can definitely be lucrative, it usually requires a much bigger upfront investment, right?
Yeah, that's true.
And it often takes time to become profitable.
Yeah, especially if you're dealing with like renovations or tenants or market fluctuations and all of that.
Exactly. So it's not that real estate is bad.
Right.
It's just a different game.
Yeah, different strategy.
Mm-hmm.
And one that might not be the fastest route, if you're trying to recover financially, which actually ties into another big theme that he talks about, which is negotiation.
Oh, interesting.
He emphasizes this constantly, not just for getting a good price on things, but for negotiating terms that work in your favor.
Because you're going to be doing a lot of negotiating, presumably, if you're acquiring businesses.
Exactly.
Makes sense.
It sounds intimidating, but he really breaks it down in a way that I thought was like, oh, okay, I can actually maybe do this.
So what are some of those tips that he shares?
Well, one of the most powerful ones is this idea of agreeing on the price first.
Okay.
And then moving on to negotiating the terms.
Interesting.
And he says this kind of subtly shifts the power dynamic.
How so?
Because once the price is set, the seller is more likely to be flexible on other aspects of the deal.
Oh, okay.
So like, for example, imagine you're buying a used car.
Okay. I can picture it.
So you agree on the price, but then you negotiate, a longer financing period or a lower interest rate, or maybe you even throw in like, some free maintenance for the first year.
Oh, I like that.
So it's about getting creative and understanding that almost everything is negotiable.
Yeah, I mean, I think people often forget that, or they're afraid to even ask.
Yeah, exactly. And what I find so fascinating about this is it's not about being, aggressive or manipulative. It's really about being strategic and knowing what levers to pull.
Right.
And it makes negotiation seem less about like winning and losing
Mm-hmm.
and more about finding an arrangement that works for both sides.
Absolutely.
Now, speaking of business, one thing that stood out to me was his focus on what he calls income leaps, not baby steps.
Income leaps, huh?
Yeah, so he contrasts this with the slow grind of, a traditional job.
Okay.
And he's suggesting that business ownership offers the potential for much faster financial growth.
Right, because you have that control, you have that leverage.
Exactly. It's all about leverage.
In a traditional job, your income is directly tied to the hours you work, right?
Right.
And you can get raises, you can get promotions.
But there's often a ceiling. Whereas with business ownership, you have the potential to create, systems or products or services that work for you even when you're not actively working.
I mean, it's like you're building an asset that generates income,
Yes.
even while you sleep, ideally.
That's the dream.
Exactly.
But of course, it takes work.
Right.
It takes a different kind of risk tolerance. Which brings us to a point that seemed counterintuitive to me at first, which was his emphasis on low-risk investments,
Oh, interesting.
especially for those who've already built substantial wealth.
Okay.
I was thinking, shouldn't they be taking big swings?
Right. Like you've made it, now go big.
Yeah. So how does he explain that?
Well, he talks about it as like the risk tolerance paradox.
Okay.
And, when you have less, there's this feeling of urgency.
Yeah, there's pressure.
Yeah.
You got to make things happen quickly.
But when you have a solid foundation, you can actually afford to be more patient and focus on that consistent, sustainable growth.
So it's the long game.
Exactly. Compounding is such a powerful force, and I think the wealthy really understand that slow and steady wins the race.
So it's almost like flipping the script.
Yeah, I like that.
The less you have, the more tempted you might be to gamble for a quick win.
Mm-hmm.
But the more you have, the more you can focus on that long game.
Absolutely. And I think that's a really important mindset shift
Yeah,
that can apply at any level.
totally. Even if you're just starting out.
It's about making choices that compound over time.
Okay, last but not least, let's talk about those hidden gem businesses that he mentions.
Hidden gems. Okay.
Yeah, he encourages looking beyond the obvious,
Okay.
seeking out opportunities that others might overlook.
But how do you even find those?
I know, it sounds kind of like a treasure hunt.
Yeah, it does.
So what's the secret?
Well, he says it's a combination of diligence and networking.
Okay, so doing your homework,
Exactly.
getting out there and talking to people.
Because a lot of these really profitable businesses, they're not publicly listed, they're not widely advertised.
Oh?
They might be niche operations, they might be family owned, or they might be businesses that are, kind of ripe for acquisition, but they haven't been properly marketed.
So it takes effort.
Yeah, it takes research, it takes a willingness to really connect with people who have that insider knowledge.
So it's about being curious, asking questions, being open to possibilities that maybe aren't immediately apparent.
Absolutely.
It almost makes me want to go out and start digging.
I know, and that brings us back to the power of action, which is something that Hormozi emphasizes throughout his advice. It's not enough to just understand these concepts.
Right.
You have to actually put them into practice.
Well said.
So, after all of this, after this deep dive, if you had to pick one thing from today's conversation to act on this week, what would it be? Ooh, that's a good question. I think for me, it would be to really take stock of my skills. Not just the ones that I'm currently using, but the ones that maybe I've kind of let slide or that I haven't fully developed yet.
I love that. And for our listeners out there, what's one small step you can take right now, today, to put these ideas into motion? It doesn't have to be huge.
Yeah, just start somewhere.
Exactly.
This deep dive has been packed with insights, but I think it all boils down to taking that first step,
For sure.
no matter how small.
And remember, bouncing back, it's not just about the money.
Right.
It's about building a foundation for lasting success.
And on that note, you've got this. We believe in you.
Absolutely.
Thanks for putting us for another deep dive. Until next time.
See you then.